views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. State legislatures across the country have been pushing hundreds of proposed laws with the specific goal of making it substantially harder for millions of voters to cast ballots. More than 400 bills that limit voting have been introduced in 48 different states, and already 14 states have enacted 22 new laws that restrict access to the vote. For example, Georgia has a new law that orders $1,000 fines for organizations that do the simple thing of giving food or water to people waiting online to vote. But maybe New York City is different. In New York City, recently a group of advocates rallied to garner support for the city council's Intro 1687, which calls for the expansion of voting rights to green card holders, those with work authorizations, the DACA community, and permanent city residents. 33 council members and the public advocates support the bill that would provide a process for lawful permanent residents in New York City to vote in municipal elections. Let's be clear about that. That's the city elections, like the primary we just went through. In fact, one of the council members said that at a time when states across the country are passing voter restriction laws, this is an attempt to set New York City apart as the largest city to expand voting rights to immigrants and live up to the words of no taxation without representation. So tonight we're going to review the legislation and take a look at how to increase voting participation for all New Yorkers. So let's welcome the Director of Policy and Advocacy at United Neighborhood Houses. It is Nora Moran. Ms. Moran, nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
And the Associate Counsel of Latino Justice, it is Fulvia Vargas-De Leon. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And the Senior Manager of Member Engagement at the New York Immigration Coalition, it is Theresa Thanjan. Nice to have you with us, Ms. Thanjan.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Moran, let's just start with you. You deal with a diverse population, not only immigrants, over at UNH, for people who don't know. We were trying to count how many settlement houses in the Bronx, but they're maybe up to a dozen, and they're some of the most important and vital organizations in our borough. Just talk to me about the population that you serve and why this is important to UNH and why you'd like to see Intro 1867 get passed.
Sure. So United Neighborhood Houses works with New York City settlement houses. There's 40 of them across the city. They're in every borough. And those institutions really are front doors for their community. They serve anybody who needs help and assistance. They never ask about immigration status. Really anybody who is seeking assistance around after-school services, summer camp, childcare, senior centers, you name it, they do it. And they really are, welcoming for anybody and everybody in their neighborhoods. And United Neighborhood Houses supports Intro 1867 for that very reason. We have settlement houses who are working every day alongside immigrants who, say to them, we are really engaged members of our community. We send our kids to school here. We pay taxes here. We work here. And, there's a really significant thing that we cannot do, which is vote in local elections. And because of that, we really came to this campaign because the individual settlement houses felt how important it was for UNH to be engaged and saw how meaningful it would be for the families that they work with to have, the opportunity to vote and to be enfranchised in this way. So that's, why we've been supporting it for several years and are really excited that we're at this point in the campaign right now.
Can you give me some numbers? I mean, it doesn't have to be specific numbers, but an idea. 10% of the members, or of the parents who come in, 12%, 15%, 20%. I mean, how large a group of people in your population, which I think is as representative as you're going to get of New Yorkers, how many could be affected by a law like this?
Sure. So I'd say from the settlement house perspective, because we don't ask folks about immigration status, we can't really project about how many, right. We can't really project about how many would be enfranchised that come through settlement house doors, but citywide, we estimate that it would be nearly 1 million New Yorkers who would be enfranchised by this legislation, which is really significant when you think about just the number of people who vote in local elections. We know we have low voter turnout in New York. So that would be, quite significant that extra 1 million people would be enfranchised by this law.
That is, that's significant. If you look at 1 million, you want to, again, round numbers, 8 million people in New York, there you go, 1/8 right there. Ms. Thanjan, I want to ask you about a central issue here, which we hear all the time. Wait a minute. People should be citizens. They, if they are citizens, they should have the rights to all of the beauties of, the aspects of our democracy, and which of course includes the right to vote. If you are not a citizen, why did you come here? Why aren't you a citizen? Shouldn't you already be a citizen? And why should we give you the opportunity to our most precious democratic process of voting if you're not a citizen? I mean, this is a central question, not only for voting, but for many things. And I'm sure you deal with it all the time.
Yes, we do, Gary. And to them, I would say that, the process for citizenship has just increased over time. It can take anywhere from like 6 to 12 years for someone to become a citizen, even longer, especially under the Trump administration. The times were really, really made much longer than before. So what I would say here is that, we have immigrants who are essential workers. These are people who we as a city, especially during this pandemic, have been relying on. Immigrants make up more than half of our frontline and essential workers, and they weren't able to stay home, right? They were the ones who were out there in our food industries, restaurants, hospitality, just really keeping the city running. And now we can finally give them, these New Yorkers who are risking their lives to keep us healthy and the city running, a voice in how their taxes are spent and who represents them in government. So I think the bottom line here is that we want to give, as Nora mentioned, nearly 1 million New Yorkers who live here, work here, pay taxes, and are upstanding members of their communities, a right to have a say in the direction of the city and their lives.
Is it fair to say many of, and whatever the percentages of essential workers are immigrants versus immigrants who are undocumented? In other words, there are people who are immigrants who are citizens and would naturally have the right to vote, but there are others who may be essential workers, but they're not documented. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Well, we, in terms of the statistic that we're quoting for nearly, half of essential workers during this pandemic, we're looking at immigrants of multiple statuses. That is true. But I think for us, we are focused on really expanding the electorate in New York City, right? We have an opportunity. We are on the precipice of making history. We can, at any point, the city council can pass this bill to give nearly 1 million New Yorkers a chance, green card holders and those with work authorization, an opportunity to participate in our civic engagement and in our democracy. So I say, what's the delay? Let's make it happen.
Ms. Vargas-De Leon, talk to me about the issues that could be on the table or were on the table, let's say in the Democratic primary, that could be vital to the people who did not get a chance to have their say, but you believe ought to have their say? What are the things that are on the table?
I think, like Theresa mentioned, right now we are in the midst of a pandemic still, right? And so we just had the New York City primaries, the individuals who will lead the city out of economic crisis, the housing crisis, the employment crisis that we're facing. And so we ask these individuals who are our frontline workers, show up, risk your life, pay taxes for the city, live in this community, but you cannot have a say in the individuals who represent you when we speak on how the city will recover from the pandemic. You cannot have a say in how taxes will work out. You can't have a say in where we're going to create affordable housing to address the housing crisis or the mental health services that are needed in our community. So I think the issues are vast. And yet they are an integral part of our community and yet don't have a single say in who gets to represent them at the local level.
And as I believe we're going to have Councilmember Rodriguez join us in just a bit, as he indicated, and I indicated in his statement, that it was very similar to, taxation without representation. You're doing all the work, you're putting in all of the resource that you have, and yet you can't be represented. I was interested, Ms. De Leon, in a statement that Latino Justice put out, which I have to say I did not recall, and I was glad that you brought it up, or that your organization did, that between 1968 and 2003, non-citizens were able to vote and able to run in school boards. That was fascinating to me. It's been a long time since 2003. I hadn't thought about that. Why was that lost? Who took it away? What was the reasoning behind it was taken away? Because that, to me, would start to get to the germ of the difficulties of trying to reinstate this. I thought that was a very interesting bit of local history, and frankly, returning to you for the answer.
Of course. Well, I believe it was during Mayor Bloomberg's tenure in New York City that school boards were done away with. So we no longer have local school boards, and that's how that right ceased to exist. But I think it's an important thing to remember, because a lot of people are acting like this is a novel thing. But back then we recognized that if you are part of the community, if you have children who attend the school, you should have a say on how your school is run, right? We recognized then how important it was for people to have a voice, even if they were not citizens, to participate in school board elections. So I don't, right now, speaking about it now, I think it's very similar what we're asking for. We're asking for people to have a say in the things that impact their day-to-day lives.
That's fascinating, and it's 35 years that existed. So just to recast what you said, so it was a matter of the school boards, which we recall that the Board of Ed was then, became a city agency as opposed to, an independent authority, so to speak. And that led to the fact that people who were, undocumented, et cetera, green card holders, were not able to vote in anything, even not in school. Fascinating bit of history, and I appreciate your mentioning it.
That you are correct, Gary. That meant that since 2003, we have not allowed non-citizen green card holders, individuals with work authorization, to participate in any of our local elections.
It's really a fascinating bit of history. As I said, I believe we're waiting for Councilmember Rodriguez to join us. So as soon as we have him, we'll do that. And we're going to ask him a similar version of what I'm going to ask Ms. Moran. Let's just talk about the politics of it now. So there's a potential of a supermajority in this, right? Which would mean the council could and the public advocate could literally vote this in. Are we at that point? Ms. Moran, that was for you.
Yes. Yep. So we're at the point where we have a supermajority of members on the bill, meaning that, another way to think about it is a veto-proof majority. So at this point, it's a majority of council members. So this bill can progress to have a hearing. It technically, in the eyes of the council laws, it does need to have a hearing within 60 days of hitting that supermajority. So we're reaching that point, very soon. And really, we're at the point where there is nothing stopping it from being brought to the floor for a full vote and passed by the council. So that's something that, we're really pushing for and looking forward to quickly, given that, we are at that 34 marker now.
I think this is well timed. Then I'm going to be thrilled to say that Councilmember Ydanis Rodgriguez is here with us. Councilmember, nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
We were just talking about the possibilities for Intro 1867, and what are the possibilities of getting it passed? And do you anticipate it would be a supermajority vote? So once the council does it, it's done.
Well, first of all, I hope that at a time where borders are on the attack, nationwide, New York City should be a role model when it comes to expanding voting rights. And I think that, it is time for us to live by example. This is about no taxation without representation. This is about recognizing, giving credit to those New Yorkers that during COVID, they stay providing the services. Myself being one of those New Yorkers that live with green card since 1983 to 2000. And during those years, I made the same contribution that I have made, as being citizens after 2000. I pay my taxes. I went through college. I became a teacher. I taught for 15 years. And for me, this is, the federal law already has said that state and the city are the one that has the right to decide who voted in the election. And I hope again that at a moment where we have institutions such as the New York State NAACP, the House of Justice, the Public Advocate Board President, our Democratic nominee Eric Adams being on board supporting all those council members. I think that it is time that to follow the leadership of the New York City Coalition, Immigration Coalition, and more than 60 CBO. No yes Latino, no yes Black, no yes Asian, but institutions that bring together different voices of New Yorkers who say, let's make New York City the largest municipality where we should restore the right of New Yorkers with green card and working papers to vote in municipal elections.
Was this a hard sell in the city council? Did you have to convince members? 33 is a pretty good number out of the 52. Or was this one of those that everybody was just, let's just get it done?
No, I think that, myself being elected in 2009 and being one of those who supported this bill, that when at that time we had Denny Drone, the Margaret Chain, a co-prime on this bill. And I have seen how the council being going through its own evolution. And, I can say very proud that when I will leave the council in January next year, I was part of one of the most progressive class that we have at the council. Not just people say they're progressive because it's popular, but people that have dedicated their life before being elected to fight for the progressive cause in our city. So I just think that especially now where we have large numbers of women at the council, where we also have the new blood at the council, people say, we can say that we are progressive by the book that we read and by joining international cause and not being progressive by action. So I think that the most important thing is that, again, we saw a council member from the Upper West Side, from a middle-class community and upper-class community say, we also must have followed our youth who in this time are joining the George Floyd cause, climate justice movement. It's a new type of a society where we are still seeing people embracing the fight of something that not necessarily affect their own community. So I think that we made a case, and I'm not going to say it's an easy one, because this will change the political landscape in New York City. We will give a voice to 100,000 New Yorkers to say, you will be the one that will decide who will be the new mayor, public advocate, board president, council member, who will be deciding how our taxpayer will be used to pick out the garbage, to support quality education. So, it's not an easy one, but I think that in 2021, it's a good year where I hope, again, we should be able to pass this bill.
I know that you have to go. I want to ask you one final question. Do you anticipate this being passed before the session is out, or is this going to be left over for the next council members to do it?
I hope that we can pass as soon as possible. We are behind the clock. And again, I know that if there is a march in New York City on support against any potential invasion in Cuba, we will see millions of people in the street. If there's a fight that we will be, a big rally that we'll put together against any excessive use of force by some members of the NYPD, we will see millions of people in the street. So I hope that we continue fighting with the same energy. This is about social justice. This is about giving the voice to those New Yorkers who pay the taxes. Again, they can be Irish, they can be Poland, they can be New Yorkers that they came from the former Soviet Union. They are African and Latino. So let's get it done. The number is there. And I hope again that, and I express it to the Speaker Corey Johnson, that this should be one of the legacy, as I also mentioned Mayor de Blasio when I have met in the last couple of months, that I hope again that he also leave his legacy by passing this bill.
Great. Ydanis Rodgriguez, council member from the 10th District, thank you so much. I know you're busy. We appreciate you taking a few minutes to be with us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Ms. Thanjan, I want to ask you this. The council member addressed all the different communities, some of the different ethnicities. Of course, we could be here a long time trying to get to everybody who lives in New York City. Is the city changing? I think we all are agreed that we're going to be looking at a new style city council, many younger people, certainly leaning to the left. Does that reflect a change in the city, or is it finally, we've all been here, we finally got a chance to bring the people we wanted in? You know what I'm saying? I mean, when you look at immigrants and when you look at who's out there, is it different from what it was, or are these the same people now? We'll just have a different representation.
I believe, Gary, what we're seeing is that a number of our member organizations who represent very diverse communities across New York City and the state have been really making civic engagement and education a priority for the work that they do, and it is a priority for us at the New York Immigration Coalition. So what you are seeing is a lot of work and investment in sharing, the importance of being involved in our democracy and trying to find ways to make that happen. For us, I think the reason this is so significant is that, we want to continue to give more people a voice, give more people a reason to be invested in the news and politics. And if you know that you have a say, you're going to start to definitely pay additional attention. So I think absolutely the work that we're doing, the work that Nora and Fulvia are doing is really about empowering our communities and, having them participate however they can. And what we would like to do is restore the right to vote for a significant group of immigrants who we believe could really change the electorate of the city.
Ms. Vargas-De Leon, I want to be sure that this is an issue, not just that leaders of organizations are behind, but that people who would be affected are behind. Can you talk from a Latino Justice's perspective of what you heard from people? Was this really an outcry, or was it people kind of, in position to say, you know what, we ought to make this change? Or are people themselves saying, wait a minute, I'd like to be able to cast my vote? That kind of thing. Is it grassroots out of the people or grassroots out of the organizations to put this together?
Gary, it's really grassroots out of the people. At the Our City, Our Vote rally, we've heard from community members who express the frustration of contributing to their community and not being able to participate and vote for leaders in their community. I think it's one of the things that is interesting to me is that, we go door to door and we make sure that people are counted for the census, right? And then we use those numbers to create voting districts. And yet,
they can't vote.
And then they can't vote in them, right? And so there's something to be said about the fact that we use someone's physical presence to create voting districts in which they cannot belong. And people have had enough. They want representation that is reflective of their community. They want representatives who are responsive to their needs and don't think, well, those people can't vote for me, so I'm not concerned about what they need. I think people are frustrated and they're putting up a fight, and this is where we're at now.
I want to go around the room, and we'll start with you, Ms. Vargas-De Leon. I want to ask you each to give me an example of a person or people, what they do, who they are, how they came to this country, and what they've been giving back, and why they deserve the opportunity to vote when they've been denied it. Because there are many people, and listen, you just turn on your TV, you could see it, who say, you know what, I don't want to hear it. You're not documented. I don't want you to vote because you don't have the right to. So I'm going to ask you each in your experience. So let's start with you, Ms. Vargas-De Leon from Latino Justice. Give me an example. Let's put a face on it. Who are the people? What do they do that you believe deserve the opportunity that they've not had?
It's hard to put a face to one particular person, but I like to bring it back.
However you want to characterize it, it's fine.
I like to bring it back to, I grew up in Washington Heights. And so New York Presbyterian Hospital is like the benchmark of living in Washington Heights. It's our local hospital. And thinking about a single mom that I know that works at the hospital, that sacrificed her safety and the safety of her family and her children during COVID, as a housekeeper in this hospital, risking her life, risking her safety. And
she's not documented.
Green card holder. A green card holder. Okay. And yet, even though she was risking her life, even though she was out there supporting the city during a crisis, we say to her, you can't vote. Yeah. You're essential to protect our lives, but not essential to have a voice.
I want to make sure everybody else gets a chance, but you have put a face on it, so don't say you didn't. And so you, Ms. Moran, what do you think? Give me an example of who you see and what they've been denied. And you got about 30 seconds each now.
I would point to, I was recently speaking with a settlement house staff member who is a green card holder, works in a youth development program, somebody who grew up with the organization, is really interested in working with young people and giving back to their community.
And here, I have to interject just because of time. So here's somebody who's helping our kids do better, keeping them safe, keeping them out of criminal situations, giving them things to do, and yet they can't say, this is who I'd like to be my council member. I get it.
Exactly.
So Ms. Thanjan, you'll have the final word on this. You want to characterize it for us?
Absolutely.
30 seconds.
I would share the story of Rosario, who works at one of our member organizations. She is a DACA recipient. And the irony is that she's out there providing information to communities about how to be civically engaged, but she can't participate.
All right, I've had it. You win. Here she is teaching, all that kind of stuff. And oh my goodness. All right, listen, we got to run. Thank you so much to Theresa Thanjan from NYIC, Fulvia Vargas-De Leon from Latino Justice, Nora Moran from UNH, and Councilmember Rodriguez. You can contact those organizations, and if you want more information or you want to, juice it up a little bit, please do. We want to thank our producer, Rebecca Hemick, did a ton of work to put this together this evening, and we really appreciate it. And guess what's going to happen? We'll see you next week, like we always do. Thanks to our producer, of course, Stephen Powell as well. And we'll see you. Good night.